Time to set the field for the Quaker State 400. NASCAR Sprint Cup Series qualifying for the first time ever in Sparta, Kentucky at the Kentucky Speedway. Rain here this morning canceled the opening practice for Sprint Cup teams, but they got 90 minutes, and right now things look good. 78 degrees, partly sunny skies, and the rest of the weekend looks nice. Hello and welcome, everyone, with Larry McReynolds and Kyle Petty. I'm Adam Alexander. So we had 6 hours of track time yesterday for teams to go out and test. 90 minutes of practice today. And Larry, I'm guessing still anybody's guess who's going to sit on the pole.
Well, it is, Adam. And, of course, what they did yesterday had nothing to do as far as setting the qualifying order. It was all about that one and only practice because they lost that first practice earlier today because of rain. But I think with this qualifying session starting roughly a little after 5 p.m. local time, I truly believe you want to go near the end of the session because the weather's much hotter than it was earlier today. And Kyle Busch, who just crashed his Nationwide Series car qualifying, he was the fastest cat in the alley in that one practice. So
Tough to figure out who's going to sit on the pole. Maybe even more difficult to figure out who's going to win this race tomorrow night.
Well, you look at first-time winners. You look at Brad Keselowski. You look at Regan Smith. You look at David Reagan last week. You look at all these guys, Trevor Bayne in the Daytona 500. And then you look at guys like Tony Stewart and Greg Biffle and guys like that who haven't won a race yet. And you say, my God, what's going on in Cup racing this year? And I think you have to look at it in qualifying. That's the same thing. These guys are qualifying 28th, 29th, and 30th, and these young guys and these new winners are qualifying up front.
Yeah, we actually have 7 drivers that won a race in 2010. They're not one of those 12 drivers that's been to victory lane so far in 2011.
So many question marks, and here we are at the Kentucky Speedway where we have never been before. Qualifying for the Sprint Cup Series on the way, and just a while ago in the Nationwide Series, Kyle Busch, who was quickest in the Cup car, getting turned around in Nationwide qualifying. We'll see if he can better his fate when he hits the track here in a few moments. Back to Kentucky after this. 48 cars here to fill 43 positions for tomorrow night's Quaker State 400. Ralph Shaheen.
Take a look at this picture. This is 1975 Nashville Speedway. Darrell Waltrip getting his first win. And this guy over here in the Keep On Truckin' shirt would be this guy right here in the Keep On Truckin' shirt. Michael Waltrip, I just threw you back in the mud here. Didn't mean to do that to you. So tell me a little bit about this car.
It's awesome. I'm so proud of my brother. I grew up a fan of my brother, admiring him, and it's got a picture of him winning in Nashville in 1975 right on the side of it. And I'm standing there in victory lane in my Keep On Truckin' shirt. So Kim Butler, all the folks from Aaron's were kind enough to let me run this paint scheme. You know, they took the Aaron's colors off of it and said, go at it, Mike, and got a great picture of Darrell on the hood in victory lane that night. And, you know, Ralph, that win started Darrell on his road to the Hall of Fame, and that road was came to be a reality a couple of months ago. And I'm just so happy for my brother and so thankful that I get to be a part of it because he's the reason why I'm here. You know, I always looked up to him and admired him, and he never let me down, so I'm really thankful.
And I know you're pretty excited about qualifying here at Kentucky, and that's what we're getting ready to do now.
Thank you, Ralph. And that victory for Darrell Waltrip, one of his how many, Kyle?
83?
84.
84. Just busting on him. Just busting on him, man. And the only reason I said 83 was I wanted him to correct me because when you say something to Bobby, Bobby always corrects one up. And that's a little game. Sorry.
I would say if the scream you just heard was Darrell in his motor coach.
Yeah, it was a little game. No, we were up here earlier, and I said, how many wins you got there, Darrell? 83? He was like, 84. 84.
I'll tell you what.
He shut me down.
It would be tied. It took him about a tenth of a second to correct him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he wasted no time in jumping on Kyle.
It was good, though. I needed it. It was just fun.
But reading a lot of the things that Michael said and wrote this week about that paint scheme, you know, he said that absolutely DW, his brother, not only his hero, but his role model.
Yeah, and you can watch Darrell Waltrip, a hometown hero, presented by Diet Mountain Dew, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, only on Speed. For more information and bonus footage, you can go to facebook.com/dietdew. Scott Wimmer will be the first car on track, and he will be there when we return to Sparta, Kentucky. You're watching Speed, the Motorsports Authority. Welcome back to Sparta, Kentucky, where we are getting ready to roll out Scott Wimmer. He will be the first car on track. He is locked in on speed, as is Mike Bliss, who will go out second. And now you look at the drivers who must qualify on speed. There are 13 go-or-go-homers here this weekend. David Stremme, the quickest of those in practice. Tony Raines, the slowest, Larry.
Yeah, the 5 that would be in jeopardy based on practice of not making this show would be Tony Raines, Scott Riggs, Robbie Gordon, Andy Lally, and David Starr.
Yes, they were the 5 slowest in that particular group earlier today. In practice, Scott Wimmer was, in fact, the slowest in that session at 30.876 seconds, and that is why he will be the first on track. Now, he's driving the 7 car. Robbie Gordon owns that car, but he's trying to qualify the 77, trying to put 2 cars in the show this weekend.
Yeah, the 7 is locked in. Scott has made a couple of starts in this car for Robbie Gordon at Dover back in the spring, and then a few weeks ago at Pocono.
And Wimmer does have 7 starts here in nationwide competition, 5 resulting in top 10 finishes. In fact, he was a runner-up here in 2008 driving for Richard Childress.
And I was going to say, he almost won that race.
Yep.
He ran incredibly well that night. I mean, that was a good race for him.
First lap, 31.09. I'm anxious to see what we see here in the Sprint Cup Series. If you go back to Nationwide Series qualifying, and it looks like possibly Scott's going to shut it down, most of those drivers ran 2 laps. It was kind of a mixed bag as to what lap was the quickest. But what you have to remember, these Sprint Cup Series cars, they have almost a 30-point lower rear end gear plus about 200 more horsepower to get them up to speed.
Yeah, and that's the deal. The nationwide cars going through the corner, their corner speed, I don't think it's hard to explain to a viewer sitting at home that the corner speed on a nationwide car is almost faster than the corner speed on a Cup car. But these guys, their straightaway speeds are so much greater, and you get the good out of the tire when you get to the corner so much faster with these Cup cars.
Larry, you talked about the advantage of going out late in the session because the sun going to be going down, track going to cool off. Scott Wimmer, 31.094 compared to a 30.87 in practice, a little bit slower for him.
Yeah, I think this is the, as far as today, now yesterday during that 6 hours of testing that all these drivers participated, it was very hot and sunny, but it's more relative to what they did earlier today.
Mike Bliss, the second car on track for qualifying. He is in the Big Red Ford. There's also a Big Red Chevrolet and a Big Red Toyota here this weekend, driven by Dave Blaney and Mike Skinner.
Now, Mike won the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series race here back in July of 2002, same year that he won the championship.
And if he will make his 5th start in 2011, because we know he is locked into the field, that 32 car inside the top 35 in owner points. He and Terry Labonte have been sharing time behind the wheel.
I think this car is certainly proof that if you finish the races and you can every once in a while click off a top 20, top 25 finish, that you can pretty much stay in the top 35.
Yeah, I think it is. I think, the Wood brothers had a great run at Daytona and got those 42, 43 points. And even though they weren't running for the championship, Trevor wasn't, the car owner gets those points, and that's the top 35. And they have stayed and hovered right there at the top 30. They've had some decent runs besides that, some top 10, or top 15, top 20s. But it's allowed them to keep, 2/3 of the way through the season and stay in that top 35.
First lap, the quickest, 30.86, and that's a tick better than what Bliss ran earlier today in practice. 2 cars have been on track for qualifying here at Kentucky. Mike Bliss and Scott Wimmer, 1 and 2 on the board right now. And the third man out, Tony Raines, the first of 9 consecutive drivers that will take time and must qualify on speed. Raines won the pole here in 2002 for the nationwide race and won the 01 Truck Series event, the second ever held here at Kentucky Speedway.
Just not sure about a 30.95. I think we're going to have to see a few more drivers run before we feel really good about that type of a lap. I think you need to be in the 30s.
30s,
sure.
Yeah, I think you need to be in the 30s. But, really, and you mentioned it earlier, and you just did the nationwide qualifying. It's warmer now than when these guys practiced. The sun has come out. It was overcast, and we kept thinking, bottom's going to fall out any minute during the single practice that they had for these guys.
First lap for Tony Raines was quickest. He stays second behind Mike Bliss. And you talk about that sunshine, a couple of tenths slower in his qualifying run is Tony Raines in comparison with what he did in practice earlier today. Next on track, the 81 of Scott Riggs, another of the drivers that is in the go or go home category. Told you Scott has got a nice resume here at Kentucky. Former pole winner here, Truck Series winner here.
They were not out our last two races at Daytona and Infineon. They missed the first two races they showed up at Dover, or the first three at Darlington, Dover, and Charlotte, but then they qualified for the next three.
But honestly, Darlington, Dover, and Charlotte are three of the hardest races to make,
tough.
period.
Very
so
tough.
To show up as a first year, to bring a car there for the first time, that's a huge undertaking.
And as Scott Riggs makes his qualifying run, we hear from Ralph.
Actually, we're going to talk to David Gilliland here, who's actually won here in the Nationwide Series. So we know how to get to victory lane. How do you qualify here?
The track's really rough, and you just got to manage the bumps, I think, is the biggest thing. Whenever you go and try and qualify, you're pushing everything to the limits, and the bumps seem to feel bigger. So I'm excited about it. Our talk about Ford Fusion's really good as a backup car. We had a right front shock issue yesterday, and got in the fence with our primary car. But the car's been good. We had to do mostly race trim stuff, so we did one qualifying run at the end. So I'm really anxious to get out there and see what we have. I feel like we're going to have a good car here.
All right, David Gilliland's getting ready to go, and we'll head back upstairs.
A little bit high there in 1 and 2 on his second lap, but he's the fastest of the four that's gone so far, just barely.
Yeah, he beat Mike Bliss by 3/1000ths of a second. Who knows? That could be the difference between making this race and going home.
Yeah, you certainly get the feeling that for those guys that must qualify on time, the difference back in there is not going to be much. Riggs quickest on his opening lap. He's the fastest of the four that have been out. Robbie Gordon, the fifth car on track for qualifying here at Kentucky. And this 77 car must get in on speed. Scott Wimmer already went out and qualified the 7, another car owned by Robbie, but it's locked in.
Good corner there.
Did a nice job in 3 and 4. He eased her down in there. He let it roll a little bit. Then when he picked the throttle up, he was able to stay in it.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot of time on mile-and-a-half racetracks, that you can overdrive the corner. And it didn't. If you watch the tracker, when he got to the corner, he rolled out of it and got back to it hard, and it stuck.
Elliott Sadler, that sat on the pole for the Nationwide Series, he must have lost 6 or 7 spots getting into turn 3, but he gained her all back and then some and got the pole a while ago.
The opening lap for Robbie Gordon, 30.73. And lap number 2, a bit slower.
2 good laps,
30.78. Yeah, that was solid. As consistent as we've seen. So Robbie Gordon is now quickest. Matt?
Adam, you can definitely feel that the money cloud has disappeared in a 30.86. You think that's going to be safe, Scott?
Well, I don't think it's safe at all. I think we struggled a lot with this car this weekend and changed a lot of wholesale changes, geometry changes, trying to find out what we need. But, what we're doing, like I said before, is tough considering the kind of competition we're up against, and trying to make these shows gets tougher and tougher every week. So we just need to take this as a grain of salt and keep going on. I don't think it's going to be good enough, though. Guys, I got to go.
The good news for the go-or-go-homers, we've been talking about the weather cooling down. All of the go-or-go-homer drivers go in the first 19 cars. So that doesn't give anyone a huge advantage.
And that's good, because you're going against your competition, and it's head-to-head. It's one-on-one almost. So that does make it, if you do go home, you don't feel as bad that the weather beats you or the draw beats you or your practice this morning beats you.
Andy Lally raised everyone's eyebrows last week with that qualifying run at Daytona. Started 7th. His only miss this year coming at Charlotte in the Coke 600. A DNQ, but he's made all the others, and this team right now 36th in owner points. So some big-time incentive to be racing this weekend and a chance to get back in the top 35. And so far, he's on the right side of the needle here.
Oh, this is going to be a great lap. I mean, right now, when you look right here in this corner, I mean, he's almost 3/10 on track to beat Robbie Gordon.
And that was a nice Nice lap. But that 3 and 4, he was really good. He's been lower than we've seen anybody, even though these guys are talking about running in the middle of the racetrack. He got back to the throttle pretty quick in 3 and 4 there.
I believe if I was Doug Richard, I'd be calling my man off the racetrack saying that's good enough. That'll definitely get him in.
You know, he's 3/100ths of a second off what he ran in practice earlier today, and that's as close as we've seen anyone with this warmer racetrack. Andy Lally going to go for a second lap, and if it holds serve like all the others, it will be slower, and indeed it is by a half second. But right now, the first lap for Andy Lally has him at the top of the board. Seventh car on track for qualifying, David Starr, trying to make his third start of the year. And at the line, he is fifth of the 7 cars that have been out and fourth of 5 in the go or go home category. His number's a 30.86 on the opening lap, and he is digging for more down the back straightaway.
And right there we have Scott Riggs at an 8.60. Mike Bliss, of course, he's locked in at an 8.63. David Starr's lap right there, 8.69. Yeah, David has showed up for 2 races this year and qualified for both of them at Texas and then for the Coke 600 at Charlotte. Looks like he's going to be quite a bit slower on lap 2.
And the nerves will set in as he waits and watches the other go or go homers make their qualifying runs. Ralph?
Jamie McMurray's getting his helmet on, getting ready to go do some qualifying. All right, Jamie, we've had some pretty wild weather, rain, sun, more rain. What are you thinking for qualifying? How are you going to approach this?
Well, I see the clouds are starting to roll in, so it would be nice if I could get here before we go out. We've had a really tough weekend. The car just hasn't had the pace that we've needed, so I felt like the 42 is pretty good, so we put some of their stuff in for qualifying here and hope to catch a cloud and just put a good lap in.
All right, he's going to continue to get buckled up. The sun is just hovering over the front stretch grandstands, but all the clouds are coming from turns 3 and 4. And they're headed kind of this way, guys.
And Kyle, you know, you can just hear it in his voice, the frustration. And I think that's frustration from all year long, not just from yesterday and today.
No. I think it builds up because every week as a driver, and you know this as a crew chief, every week you go to the racetrack thinking, this is the week we turn it around. This is the week we turn it around. And when you get there and you spend a day like yesterday, where you have an open day to come and throw a million things at it, and there's no time limit, and you're still not close, you've got to be frustrated.
McMurray, one of 7 drivers that won a race a year ago that has not gone to victory lane this season. In fact, he's only had 1 top 10. And now we look at TJ Bell off of turn 4 in his opening lap of qualifying.
Yeah, he didn't
car.
get through 4 or get off of 4 very good. It's still a good solid lap for him. He ends up 4th quickest at a 30, another 38.60. In fact, that ties Scott Riggs.
TJ Bell, like the other go or go homers, staying in it down the back straightaway.
Right now, he's a little bit better on this second lap than lap 1, which I think he certainly needs to be. Yeah, he's definitely going to pick up here on lap 2. Picks up over a 10th.
Good
yes,
job.
He did. 30.73, the lap of record for TJ Bell, and that will lock Andy Lally into the race. Tonight, the biggest party in racing hits high gear in the Bluegrass State. Tune in as Daytona 500 winner David Reagan and track owner Bruton Smith join the fun. Don't miss NASCAR Trackside from Kentucky. It happens tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Speed. The 9th car to roll on the track in qualifying, Michael McDowell. Got an ARCA win here at the Kentucky Speedway back in 2007.
It's the first driver we've seen that didn't leave pit road like they stole it, you know, grabbing gears. He actually buffed his tires a little bit through 1 and 2.
And we saw that. I think we saw that in the practice. There were 2 or 3 teams that went out and scuffed their tires. Just went out and run them down the backstretch or run them through a corner just to knock the glaze off of it, as we used to say.
Yeah, because this tire does not seem like it has a ton of give up in it.
And there are 13 go or go homers here today. 6 of them have taken time. Michael McDowell becoming the 7th of those. 5 drivers will go home. We do know Andy Lally is locked into the field.
Well, McDowell's on a pretty good run here. In fact, it looks like he may lock himself in on lap 1. And I'd say the next word you'll hear will be, that's good.
Shut it down. Michael McDowell to the top of the board. There it is.
Perfect
Right
call.
on cue.
Perfect call.
30-37 for Michael McDowell. 9 of 48 drivers have taken time. Back at the Kentucky Speedway, Travis Kvapil heading back to the garage with a big smile on his face. He is currently 3rd, and that will lock him into the field behind Michael McDowell and Andy Lally, and Lally with Matt Yoakum.
And he just dropped down to 2nd, but the stress is off. Conditions played into your hands?
I think they did. Obviously, with the sun coming out and soaking into the track a little bit more, it got a little free. We were a little tight in practice. Doug, Richard, and the guys from TRG Motorsports, it's great. The stress has been huge because we got Cool Works Cup on board on this weekend, and to have a new sponsor, if we didn't make the race, obviously it would have been horrible. But this is the most amount of guys I've had to out-qualify before. But this team put it together and gave me a good car. We were sweating it in practice just before qualifying here, and boy, what a relief. Big thanks to TRG Motorsports. I know all our guys that are racing in Lime Rock, Pompelli and Eversley and Buckler and Steve and the guys, Duncan and all the guys out on the West Coast there. It's a big weekend for TRG, so to make the race is huge. So.
Now the sun's out, guys, on the front stretch, but there is a very dark and ominous cloud covering turn 3. Could get interesting.
J.J. Yaley about to put his time on the board, and he goes 3rd and locks himself in. How about a 30-61? And they're going to tell him what, Larry?
That's good. And they better tell him quickly.
Quickly. Yeah.
Real quickly.
Real quick on that one, man.
J.J. locking himself into the field means Tony Raines will go home. He does not qualify for the Quaker State 400. David Gilliland, the 12th car to qualify this afternoon here at Kentucky. His opening lap had him outside the top 10. Nice recovery on lap 2, 30-61. Puts David, who is locked into the field 3rd right now behind Michael McDowell and Andy Lally.
You know, we interviewed David earlier. He won the NASCAR Nationwide Series race here in 2006. No question, that was a career maker for David Gilliland. It led him to get that ride for Robert Yates Racing.
It was like, who is this guy? He wins that race, and all of a sudden, a star is born, and he's really done a nice job of hanging around ever since.
Well, and I think the fact, Kyle, that he did it in equipment that he was not expected to perform in.
That was the big surprise more than anything else that day, was the team that won. He is a driver, that was big, but that whole group was a big deal.
McMurray on track, coming to the green flag for his qualifying run as we check in with Ralph.
With Clint Boyer. All right, how are you approaching the qualifying session here based on the amount of knowledge you've been able to gain?
Well, A, I'm hoping we get it in, but B, I'm hoping those clouds at least get close enough to cool it down a little bit. Our Cheerios, Hamburger Helper Chevrolet, has been okay. Not great by any standards, but you know, I feel like we could probably better our position a little bit in qualifying here if I can get myself a good lap in. But it's just been a long couple days for us. You know, long test session yesterday. Just really couldn't find a good handle on the car. Today was a little bit of a struggle, but the good news is we had time to go through so many things. Now it's time to go back, let the engineers go through their little computers and find us a good package for tomorrow night.
All right, he's going to go follow the car up to the line. And again, Adam, everybody watching those clouds creeping in off of 3 and 4.
Jamie McMurray, Ralph, able to qualify in the 3rd position. 30-56 was his time. Qualifying continues here at Kentucky. Mike Skinner, as you see, currently 2nd, 30-39, equating to 177 and some change. So he is in the field. We told you Tony Raines will go home, and now David Starr joins him in that category. They fail to qualify. The man on the bubble now is Scott Riggs. He will wait to see his fate as Dave Blaney goes on track. And Dave is locked into the field. He was 15th, excuse me. He was 28th in practice earlier today.
He got in there and picked up the gas. It bobbled just a touch, but not really that much right there when he threw 3 and 4. and he's running in the middle of the racetrack. And it's funny, during that practice, you heard guys talk about what's surprising about this place. And some of the drivers said, I'm surprised it's as bumpy as it is, and I'm surprised we have to run as high on the racetrack as what we are in practice. Because I think everybody assumed they would come back up here to the way it used to be when we tested and run right back on the bottom of the racetrack.
Well, looks like this is going to be a great lap for Dave Blaney. He'll go to the top at a 30-32, beats Michael McDowell by half of a tenth.
So Dave Blaney, the new leader, with 15 cars having taken time in qualifying here at Kentucky. 16 cars have now been on track for qualifying at Kentucky. The most recent, Joe Nemechek, who qualifies into the field at 30-35. He is second behind Dave Blaney, and that sends Scott Riggs home. So far, Riggs, David Starr, Tony Raines failing to qualify for tomorrow night's Quaker State 400. And the next to last go or go homer on track now, Michael Waltrip taking time.
Looked pretty good right there. Get down in the corner good. Right in the middle of the racetrack.
And if you look right there, the tracker looks good. In fact, he's about a tenth to the good right now. Michael Waltrip would absolutely be a driver that wants to see this qualifying session completed. You heard Clint Boyer a little concerned a while ago. Michael wants to see it go all the way.
And if it goes all the way, Waltrip will be in.
Good lap.
30-15.
And that will send T.J. Bell, who ran that 30-86, that will send him to the house.
And that puts Robbie Gordon's second car on the bubble. Ralph?
All right, down here with Dale Jr. getting his helmet on. Dale, how are you gonna, he's gonna crawl in here. We're gonna let him get in first. And they're gonna have to strap him in here. We were just talking about the weather as we were taking a look off at turn 3 and 4, and boy, the clouds were definitely creeping in and the wind has picked up, and as you can see, Dale's got a unique paint scheme that he's running here this weekend, this Diet Mountain Dew paint scheme. We're going to jump in here real quick and ask him about it. Dale, tell me about this unique paint scheme you're running here today.
Well, it's just the Diet Mountain Dew paint scheme, and it kind of mimics one of Daryl's paint schemes from years ago. And he was from Kentucky, so I guess they figured they'd bring it out here this weekend.
All right, well, we're going to see what the kid from North Carolina can do with that Kentucky famous paint scheme.
Yeah, that's the paint scheme that Daryl rode to 2 of his 3 championships in 1981 and 1982.
And that pretty much explained it. Well, it looks like Daryl's car, and he's from Kentucky, so we thought we'd drag it out here. That was a great answer. That was a great answer.
Landon Castle, no stranger to success on qualifying day, and he's done it again. 30-13 put him to the top.
You know, one thing that Landon Castle does, even though he's locked in, he really works hard on his simulator every single week on qualifying at these tracks.
So Landon Castle the quickest. Larry pointed out he was locked in. David Strimmy is not. He's the last go or go homer when we return. 48 cars here this weekend. 5 will go home. David Strimmy not one of those. He just made his qualifying run, went to 3rd. And now we know Robbie Gordon, T.J. Bell, Scott Riggs, David Starr, and Tony Raines will not race tomorrow night in the Quaker State 400. And here's Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Now, of our 35 guys that are locked into the show, and quite honestly, even some of the go-or-go homers, it's hard to find a driver that's not competed here at Kentucky Speedway in some division. Dale Earnhardt Jr., other than a lot of testing, he's never competed here in a race.
Junior inside the top 5 right now. He's the 20th car to take time, and he goes to 3rd. 30-18 for the Diet Mountain Dew Chevrolet. He's still getting after it, isn't he, Larry?
And right now, he looks to be a little better on lap 2. All depends on how he gets through 3 and 4. Looks like he kind of eased it down in there. And I think he might pay a dividend by not overdriving turn 3, maybe just overlay his first lap.
First lap was 30-189, and the second one a 30-19. So a bit slower on lap 2. Dale Earnhardt Jr. stays in the 3rd position of those 20 that have been out. Matt?
And catching up with Michael Waltrip's special paint scheme. Impressive lap. The stress now finally off
Yes, mainly because of a rule change now, right? I mean, my practice time gets me in if it rains and either you're perspiring or it's starting to sprinkle. I feel a few drops. But Daryl wanted this car to be chrome. NASCAR doesn't allow chrome. So we went with the next best thing, a retro 1975 victory lane shot of Big DW grabbing that first Cup win. And that win, Matt, started him on the road to the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And coming to Kentucky a couple of weeks after he gets inaugurated and inducted, and being able to celebrate his career, it's really special for me.
The clouds are continuing to move around, guys. Sprinkles down here in the garage.
As Brian Vickers becomes the 21st car to go out for qualifying. Larry, you and I looked at each other funny when Michael said he thinks he's locked in now.
Yeah, and I don't think that's right. This qualifying session has to be completed for Michael Waltrip to be in the show, because even if they have practice, it's still determine what 43 drivers will make this show before we even get to the track. If we do not have qualifying, Michael Waltrip, the 15, would not be one of them.
In fact, both he and David Stremme, as Brian Vickers turns a nice lap. How about 29.78, the first driver to go below 30 seconds. Michael Waltrip and David Stremme locked in on time right now, both in the category of drivers that would go home if, in fact, we got rain. And this qualifying session was not run to completion based on our understanding on the setup. And Vickers, despite being good on lap one, going to give a go for a second lap, and it's slower, 29.84. So Vickers first with his opening lap, 29.781 seconds. That's good for 181.324 miles per hour.
Brian has one start here in the NASCAR Nationwide Series. The year he won the championship back in 2003, finished 6th. They're all looking up in the sky. Kevin Harvick and his teammate Clint Boyer.
Wednesday, Adam Carolla brings his serious love of cars and seriously funny point of view to Speed with the Car Show, and nothing is off limits. The Car Show premieres this Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, only on Speed. Mark Martin, the 22nd driver to go out in qualifying today here at the Kentucky Speedway, won his 50th career pole last week at Daytona for the Coke Zero 400. That was special for him, and I'm guessing Quaker State would like him to win the pole here this weekend, since they've got the sponsorship of the inaugural event right here at Kentucky.
On a pretty good lap so far. Mark was one of 7 drivers that participated in a Goodyear tire test here back on June the 1st. Don't know if it's going to be good enough to knock Brian Vickers off, though, but it will be on the front row for the time being for Mark.
29.995 for Mark Martin, a driver who is double dipping this weekend. He will start 12th tonight in the nationwide race here at Kentucky. Ralph?
Well, we're getting a couple of drops down here, Adam. We also have Kevin Harvick, and the wind is picking up. How's the wind going to impact your qualifying run?
I was just telling him I don't sit on many poles, so when I do sit on a pole, something has to happen. It was a lot like this in Indianapolis one time, and they had about 8 cars, but actually this is kind of the primo time to go, and it's just a few little drops, and the clouds are over the top, and the grip is just really high. But if it rains like it's starting to, that won't work. So it's you never know. It's just the luck of where it all hits. And our Budweiser Chevy's been all over the map. You know, we've been frustrated, happy, good, bad, however you want to put it. So who knows?
Well, he is a former winner here, so he knows something about running here at Kentucky.
He won the inaugural nationwide race back in 2001. You see the raindrops? NASCAR checking the track for moisture. We're back after a break. The NASCAR Sprint Cup Series making their inaugural visit to the Kentucky Speedway. Rain has been a theme today. It washed out the opening practice this morning, and now it's playing a little game with qualifying. Brian Vickers at the top of the board with 22 drivers having gone out and taken time. And you see the raindrops continue to fall. And the official word has come in: we have lost the track. So we sit and wait, and with that, let's visit with the fastest man so far, Matt.
Now, Adam, Brian Vickers will beg to differ. We haven't lost the racetrack. It's just a light sprinkling.
A light sprinkling. I think it looks fine. I don't see what these guys are complaining about.
Now, as far as your qualifying lap, you debriefed already with your crew chief, Ryan Pemberton. Where do you feel like you made up time and lost time?
The car was definitely better than in practice. I think we made a lot of improvements, especially from yesterday. We were trying some stuff that didn't really work, and our test engine was a little bit down from the day. But the race trim stuff was really good at the end. We learned from that. We applied that to our qualifying stuff. I think we laid it down a good lap. I did leave a little bit coming to the green. I got into gas really early, and it got out from under me late. I had to get out of it, but hopefully we didn't lose too much.
Now, when we catch up with Brian maybe a little bit later in our show, KP, we'll talk about world finance and other interesting topics.
Is that back to me?
I think that was back to you.
Okay.
So you'll wait for that, Kyle?
I am waiting for that. I'm going to sit right here, do the rain shower, and just wait on him.
We got a little bit of house cleaning.
Oh, what do we got to do?
Well, we've got to straighten this whole deal out about who's in the show if we don't get qualifying in and how the field is set. Because what we've got a situation where, qualifying is being delayed because of rain. We're not sure what's going to happen here. But we did get practice in. We got a full practice in, that 90-minute final practice. When the entry list is complete, before we even unload the first day, NASCAR knows by the rule book what 43 drivers or teams are locked in the show. We know that before they even hit the racetrack for practice. The second step, if we get practice, which we did, is the starting order is determined now by the fastest to the slowest from that practice. So example, Kyle Busch would be on the pole. He would start on the pole should we lose this qualifying session.
And we heard Michael Waltrip earlier, who made his qualifying run, and all the go-or-go-homers have gone on track and made their qualifying run. Michael Waltrip, David Strimmy, two of those in the go-or-go-home category that were quick enough to get into the race. That's the good news for them. The bad news is if we don't get this track dried out and complete this qualifying session, Larry, based on the rule book, they would go home.
And two drivers that would benefit from that would be Tony Raines and Scott Riggs, who right now, they're not in the show, but if we lose qualifying, they would come back in per the NASCAR rule book.
And three drivers that really will not be impacted by the rule book, T.J. Bell, Robbie Gordon, and David Starr. They were a part of the 5 that would go home if qualifying were rained out, but they were not in the fast 8 of the 13 go-or-go-homers, so they're going to go home regardless.
And for you people sitting at home, I'm sitting here in the booth with these guys, and I'm just as lost as you are.
It's pretty simple now. We know what 43 drivers are going to make the show
that was good.
before we even get here.
That was a great explanation. That really was a good explanation. But it's, as you said, they've changed the rules so many times on qualifying this year by the go-or-go-homers going in one group by themselves and then integrating them back into the pack and then using practice speeds. I mean, there's so many different changes that have happened in the first 15 or 16 races just to the qualifying procedure itself.
Now, one change they made prior to this weekend, which it really doesn't change a whole lot the way it worked out, is prior to this weekend, if we got practice in and we lost qualifying, even if a go-or-go-homer was the fastest of all the drivers, the best he could start was 36. They have now made that change that everyone is mixed together just like the qualifying order. I like that. If you're fastest, you deserve the right to start up near the front.
Yeah, it used to be you'd take those in a situation like what we have today where qualifying could possibly rain out. You take practice, you take the top 35 in owner points, where they practiced, where they start. And then from those guys that were outside the top 35 in owner points, they would have to start somewhere from 36th on back. So this certainly will reward those guys that turned in a good practice lap if, in fact, qualifying is washed out here today. You see the next car to run, Denny Hamlin. He knows where he will start tomorrow night. He changed the engine earlier today in practice. He will be at the tail of the field regardless of what happens here. NASCAR Sprint Cup qualifying in Sparta, Kentucky, halted by rain. 22 of 48 cars had taken time. Brian Vickers, Mark Martin, Landon Castle, Michael Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt Jr., the top 5. And now we hear from a man who knows what success is all about here, Joey Logano with Ralph Shaheen.
Well, I was trying to get him to sit because I'd look a lot more like your height. See? There you go. Now I'm not like in your shadow all day. Although without any sun, I don't think anybody's going to be in your shadow. All right, so you've won here more than just about anybody. What's the key?
I don't know. I mean, every time we come here, it's something different that I fight. And obviously this year, the new car and the new tire, it's really changed a lot. You know, the line I'm running, even in the Nationwide car, is a lot different than I thought we were going to be running when we came here. So I think it's going to be a different race than what I've normally seen here. So we'll see what happens. I think qualifying is going to be really important here. So hopefully we get a lap in here. And it didn't look like it was going to be a big storm. It seems like it's drying up now. So I think we'll get qualifying in here, and we'll see what our Home Depot's Toyota's got.
How did your line change? What's different about it?
It just seems like everyone's running a lot higher. You know, the rubbered it up a lot more, and you know, we're running up in the second lane. Usually, when we came here, it was always right on the bottom, and you know, usually late in the race, we're able to move up. You see, guys are qualifying in the second lane already, so I'm kind of surprised it's not up to the third lane with so much rubbers that's there. But you know, we'll see what happens tonight in the Nationwide race. I think it'll be a good tool to learn, I think, for tomorrow in the Cup car.
Do you like going through the bumps, or do you try to find a way to get around them?
Well, at some point, you're going to have to run through them. We're not going to have an option. You know, on a restart, if you're on the bottom, something like that, you're going to have to go through them. You know, and it's similar to like Las Vegas. You know, there's a lot of bumps there in 1 and 2, and you want to see if you can get your car to be good over them. But it's like a happy medium. You're trying to find a balance somewhere in there that your car is good, you know, when it's smooth, but somehow get through the bumps. And I think the guy that can run on the bottom is going to be really good, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
All right, we'll find out. I'm going to stand up quickly before he does. Adam.
Thanks, Ralph. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup Series qualifying from Kentucky is brought to you by Hunt Brothers Pizza. Visit hbpracing.com to learn how to buy pizza and get free racing gear. Matt Kenseth, the runner-up last week, waiting with crew chief Jimmy Finning. And Matt, who are you waiting with?
I'm standing by with former Daytona 500 championship winning crew chief Slugger Labby. Your team, it just seems week in, week out, very solid. What impresses you most, though, about Paul's improvement this year?
He just really focused. You know, we made a change to come over to RCR, and he had some big shoes to step up to, and he's done really good on his qualifying. Right now, if it rains out, we'll start 10th, and that'll be 8 weeks in a row we qualified in the top 10, so that's a huge improvement for us. And the cars we're building right now are really, really good. The teammates are feeding off of us, and you know, we said from the start that we don't want to be a hindrance, we want to help, and like this weekend, a lot of information from our team has gone to the other 3 or 4 teams that we have, and that's what we're supposed to do. And I'm sure when we get to Loudon next week, I'll be wearing Shane Wilson out from the 33 because they run really good there at Loudon. So but that's what you're supposed to do as teammates. But man, Paul's really focused. He's really into it. Yesterday, he kept hopping out of the car, wanted to look at the PI data, just trying to understand better. So when we go to tracks that don't have PI data, he wants to make sure what the car is doing, what he's saying is the same things. But man, his mentality is all about racing, and he's 100% focused.
You mentioned your stellar qualifying performances. Do people underestimate really the trickle-down effect of, you know, how important that success is on pole day that carry over to Sunday?
Well, it means a couple things, really. You get a better pit stall, and you have better track position. And we know in today's standards, as it's raining really hard out again, in today's standards, track position is everything. So when you start the race with better track position, it parlays you into a better finish, hopefully. So we'll just keep going there. The last 8 weeks have been really good to us, and hopefully we just keep on rolling.
The rain has definitely picked up, Ralph, and they were 10th fastest in practice.
You know, a year ago, Matt, David Rudiman and I were standing in Victory Lane at Chicago, and we were just about this wet because you were spraying everybody with champagne after a big win. Maybe we can do that again this weekend. What do you think?
That'd be great. It's not quite the same right now as what it was, but hopefully it'll stop long enough. I think we got a great Tom Toyota, and I'd like to get a chance to qualify it anyway.
You know, when a racetrack gets wet like this, if it does dry back out, do you tend to think we'll see some grip, more grip, less grip? You get differing opinions on this one.
Truex just told me there's going to be more grip, so I don't know. I think definitely the track's obviously going to be cooler, but, you know, you have the jet dryers out there, and always seems to be a little bit of residue that seems to get on a racetrack from those. So, but fortunately, you know, there's quite a few cars that are going to go out before us before we get a chance to go, if we do get a chance to go here. So, again, I think there'll be some more grip. Track temperature is going to be down. I think the grip will be up.
How you enjoying the experience here at Kentucky so far?
Kentucky's great. I mean, it's one of my favorite racetracks when we were racing the Truck Series and the Nationwide Series, and now that they've got a Cup date, it's great. You know, places definitely got character. It makes you work awful hard to get your car good, but Rodney Childers and I have done, Rodney Childers has done a good, not me, I don't have anything to do with it, I just hold the steering wheel, but Rodney Childers has done a great job, and we got a good Tums Toyota.
All right, David, good luck, and we'll see if I can meet you in Victory Lane again tomorrow night.
Of course, David Rudeman, 2 career victories, both of them on mile-and-a-half tracks. The Coca-Cola 600, and as Ralph mentioned, 1 year ago at Chicagoland.
You know, you heard Slugger Labby, crew chief for Paul Menard, talk about the PI data. That was a big day yesterday for these race teams, because with the NASCAR testing policy, they cannot go test at a racetrack that any of the top 3 series race at. But as they do with all of the top 3 series, when we go to a new track, they normally have a full day of testing. The day before we check in for practice and qualifying, and teams are allowed to run a different car with data acquisition. And I promise you, they were learning for Kentucky, but they were learning for Michigan. They were learning for Kansas. They were learning for a lot of different racetracks, and an opportunity to A/B things without the pressure of having to worry about practice, qualifying, getting ready to race.
Yeah, and think about that. When you get an opportunity as a team to go to a field of play, whether it be baseball, basketball, I don't care what it is, and actually compete or be there and gather data and gather information, then you're going to get as much information as you can. And you talk about that. You talk about everything that went on yesterday. They had to gather data and try stuff, whether it's bump stops or springs that they knew were never going to work at Kansas, that they knew were never going to work here. At least they can extrapolate out that information and put it in another model for them. And I think that's what a lot of these teams tried to do yesterday. And that's why it hurts sometimes some of these other teams that we look at that are struggling to make races, because they don't have that opportunity to go back and dissect that like that.
You know what I thought was interesting, Larry, about yesterday is so many teams brought 2 cars here this weekend like they do every week to the racetrack, their primary and their backup, and they had that backup car slated to be the test car yesterday with full plans of putting in their primary today. And you know what? Some of them like the backup so much they're racing it this weekend.
Oh, yeah, I had to call a little audible there near the end of the day.
We're waiting out the rain at Kentucky. Brian Vickers fastest so far in qualifying. Tonight, the biggest party in racing hits high gear in the Bluegrass State. Tune in as Daytona 500 winner David Reagan and track owner Bruton Smith join the fun. Don't miss NASCAR Trackside from Kentucky. It's tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Speed. So it is now official. Qualifying has been rained out for the inaugural Quaker State 400 at Kentucky.
They're in a box. We're supposed to have a green flag for the Nationwide Series race here in about an hour and a half. That's about at least the amount of time that it takes to drive this mile-and-a-half racetrack.
Yeah, and once you get in that box, you can't. Once you bump up against that time, the race is the most important thing for these guys. We know we can start qualifying by points and by the system that NASCAR has. So they choose to scrap that and then put on the best show they can tonight for the fans, which is the nationwide race.
I really like the fact that the fastest cars are going to start at the front. No longer do you go to the points, because we had that practice. I love what they've done this year.
Yeah, and so the 5 guys that will go home: Michael Waltrip, David Strimmy, T.J. Bell, Robbie Gordon, David Starr. We knew that coming here this weekend. If qualifying had been rained out, now it has. And as Larry just pointed out, we revert back to that 90-minute practice session that we had earlier today to set the field for tomorrow night's race, putting Kyle Busch on the pole because he was the fastest man earlier today.
And I think he's relieved probably for a couple of reasons. One, he's going to start this race on the pole. The last time he was on the track, he busted his tail in that Nationwide Series car qualifying.
And think about this. He started last in the truck race. He's starting because he missed the driver's meet, and he's starting last in the Nationwide race because he busted his rear end. And now he gets to start pole on the Cup race. So it's a perfect weekend for Kyle Busch.
Joining Kyle Busch on the front row, Juan Pablo Montoya, Kurt Busch, Casey Kane, Jimmy Johnson, Brad Keselowski, Carl Edwards, David Reagan, Tony Stewart, and Paul Menard will be the top 10 tomorrow night. It's the inaugural Quaker State 400 from Kentucky. Coming up next, it's the day, the 1984 Firecracker 400. Thanks for being with us on Speed for qualifying. So long from Kentucky.